Hello my dears and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about the recent Russell Brand allegations and how the internet is losing its mind right now. If you're unaware of what's currently going on right now, Russell Brand has received sexual allegations from 4 anonymous women between the years of 2006 and 2013. The Times did a 4-year investigation into Brand and have recently released their findings, and Channel 4 Dispatches also released a documentary titled Russell Brand in Plain Sight. Now there is currently a Twitter war or an X war, whatever, currently happening online between the Believe All Women crew and the Everything is a Conspiracy crew. The unfortunate thing about the internet is that it does foster an environment that favors the extremes, and that is exactly what we're witnessing with the recent Russell Brand allegations. The Believe All Women seem to believe everything, and the Everything is a Conspiracy crowd seem to believe absolutely nothing. But if there is one thing that both of these two sides seem to have in common, is that neither seem to believe in due process, because if they did, they wouldn't conclude if Russell Brand is innocent or guilty until an actual trial has happened. Now, while I personally do think that both sides are completely bonkers, I can understand them. Those who believe the allegations likely believe them because of Russell Brand's past. It's not a secret that the Russell Brand we know today is not the same Russell Brand that he used to be. He used to be a man of many addictions, he was highly promiscuous, and he was often unruly. He was definitely the type to push boundaries and sometimes take things too far. And I would assume that because of all of this stuff from his past, it's made the recent allegations seem more credible to some. That, along with the recent Me Too movement and the idea that we should believe all women, which, by the way, is a very incoherent position. The Believe All Women crew give me the same energy as the mobs who would have lynched black men decades ago just from the mere allegation of rape by white women. And it seems that the Believe All Women crowd seem to have a similar way of looking at things. Just the mere allegation is enough for them for a man to lose everything. And we seem to be seeing this happening with Russell Brand now. Russell Brand has been completely demonetized from YouTube. He's been dropped from projects that he had with BBC, and he's also been dropped from an upcoming project that he was supposed to do with Jeremy Corbyn. Which also brings me to another point. There are some people who think that Russell Brand is some kind of alt-right or right-wing figure or something. And my question to those people is, in what world? He very much gives me the impression that he's just an anti-establishment hippie liberal. I never got the vibe that he was remotely conservative or right-wing at all. I understand that some people think he's right-wing because he questioned the vaccine or something, but I think that Russell Brand's questioning of the vaccine probably has way more to do with his anti-establishment, anti-big pharma views than it does to do with any loyalty he has to conservatism. Look, I understand that there are certain parts of the online left that are Puritans, but not everybody you disagree with or everyone you dislike suddenly becomes right-wing. But I shouldn't really be surprised, to be honest with you, because these days it seems like everyone and everything is right-wing. Apparently even exercise is right-wing. Absolute nutters. But as I was saying, Brand has also been dropped by his book publisher, he's also been dropped from his management agency, and he also has been dropped from a charity that he was working with. And Rumble have revealed that they were contacted by Conservative MP Dame Caroline Dinenage, who contacted Rumble essentially urging them to demonetize Brand and asking if they will be following in YouTube's footsteps. And this has made a lot of people suspicious and wonder if this is maybe why YouTube demonetized Russell Brand. But who knows, YouTube demonetizes people all the time, so they could have just done that on their own accord. Now this would all make sense to me if he was actually convicted of something, but this seems to have all happened purely off the back of allegations. Now the Believe All Women side seem to scoff at the idea of false allegations as if those things never happen, when just recently a woman in the UK was jailed for 8 years for making false rape and sex trafficking allegations. And what about the men that we've seen accused of such crimes but been found innocent in court? I think it's often hard for women to sympathize with those who are falsely accused because it's not something that's ever likely to happen to them, but it's a lot easier for them to sympathize with the accusers because it's probably more likely that they've had their own negative sexual experiences with men. However, in the same way that we can acknowledge that there are some people who do some very terrible things, I also think it's important for us to be able to acknowledge that there are also some people who lie about very terrible things. And this is the reason why we have due process, so that we can convict people on the basis of evidence instead of words. Now, that doesn't mean our justice system is perfect. There are sometimes innocent people who go to prison, and there are sometimes guilty people who get acquitted. But it's the best system that we have right now. I do personally agree that sexual allegations should absolutely be taken seriously, and by taken seriously, I mean that they should be investigated, not that they should be automatically believed. Now, Brand did address the allegations before everything was released, and this is what he had to say.
Now, this isn't the usual type of video we make on this channel where we critique, attack and undermine the news in all its corruption, because in this story, I am the news. I've received two extremely disturbing letters, or a letter and an email, one from a mainstream media TV company, one from a newspaper, listing a litany of extremely egregious and aggressive attacks, as well as some pretty stupid stuff like my community festival should be stopped, that I shouldn't be able to attack mainstream media narratives on this channel. But amidst this litany of astonishing, rather baroque attacks are some very serious allegations that I absolutely refute. These allegations pertain to the time when I was working in the mainstream, when I was in the newspapers all the time, when I was in the movies, and as I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual. I was always transparent about that then, almost too transparent. And I'm being transparent about it now as well. And to see that transparency metastasized into something criminal that I absolutely deny makes me question, is there another agenda at play? Particularly when we've seen coordinated media attacks before.
Now this has riled up the everything is a conspiracy crowd. There are some people speculating that Russell Brand is being set up by the establishment media because of his anti-establishment content and because of the fact that he has such a large audience. Now I can also understand this side too. When you consider all the things that people have been witnessing happening in the Western world recently, people quite simply do not trust the establishment. And to be honest, the establishment hasn't really done a great job at helping their own credibility. People saw lies and censorship during the pandemic. They've also witnessed public figures stripped of their bank accounts. They've witnessed people have their bank accounts frozen for protesting. And speaking of Canadians, they can't even access certain news outlets right now. And here in the UK, we've seen people get arrested over social media posts. And we've seen people lose their jobs for holding views that were considered common sense 5 minutes ago. So it would be very dishonest of me to claim that I don't understand at all how the everything is a conspiracy crew came to be. I think that they are very much a consequence of the establishment's own actions. Although I can understand where they're coming from, I do still think that their position on this is also incoherent. Just because you agree with someone's ideas or political views or opinions doesn't mean they can't also be guilty of crimes. Yes, it's possible that Brand challenges mainstream media and the establishment, and it's also possible that he could have also done some dodgy things in his past. I've seen some people from this camp say, well, why didn't they go to the police at the time of the incident? And I do think that many of us are probably looking at this case through a post-Me Too lens. I can understand that in a post-Me Too era, a woman or anyone would feel more comfortable to come forward with these kind of allegations against a powerful celebrity. But these alleged incidents apparently took place between 2006 and 2013, which would have been before the Me Too movement. These women probably wouldn't have felt as comfortable going to the police and taking on a celebrity. Whereas nowadays they probably would feel a bit different about it because the culture has changed. Now personally, my biggest question in all of this is how the media handle these kind of allegations. Should they be allowed to report on these stories if it hasn't even gone to trial? And if it was to go to trial, would they be able to find a jury that hasn't been influenced by the media that's been released on the case prior? I just find it interesting how police officers, etc., have certain rules and protocols in terms of what they are and aren't allowed to do with evidence before it goes to trial. And I just find it bizarre that reporters just don't seem to have any rules in terms of what they can do with the evidence prior to any cases like this going to trial. Now, if you're curious about what I personally think about the Russell Brand allegations, my current position on this is that I'm suspicious of everybody. I'm suspicious of Brand because of one particular allegation that was made against him by a woman who they renamed Nadia. The reason why I've taken her allegation a little bit more seriously is because she provided evidence in the form of text messages and in the form of a rape crisis center report. She alleges that Brand raped her in his LA home. Now, there have been some disputes online over this case because some people are saying that the text messages that she provided look more like she was pressured into having sex without a condom. When we look at the text provided, if we assume that they're all legit for now, then it does look as though her main issue was the fact that the sex was unprotected. She says things like, last time you asked me condom or no condom. When I say condom, that doesn't mean it's optional. I feel like that part of the message maybe helps us to understand what she may have meant when she said, it's dangerous that you think you can get your own way all the time. And when a girl says no, it means no. Because it seems as though she was expressing frustration over the fact that he hadn't respected her wishes to use protection. The text also suggests that she may have been panicking about the unprotected sex sex because of his notorious reputation for being a slag. As she says things like, should I get tested? You don't have the best reputation. And she also mentions how she prides herself on being safe. She also talks about a glazed look that came over him, and knowing how he was at the time, he may have been really intoxicated at the time of this or really high. I've always been really curious about this. People say that if a woman is under the influence, then she can't consent. And I'm curious to know, does that also apply to a man who's under the influence? And if she was also under the influence, then could either of them consent? If this rule only applies to women, but it doesn't apply to men, then why? Considering substances affect both men and women in the same way, in that neither of them are in the right state of mind. So the text messages do support the idea that her main issue with Brand was the fact that he didn't support her wishes to use protection, which is still very much bad. Like, Brand doesn't come out looking good in either scenario here. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Patience, what about the report she made at the Rape Crisis Center? Could it be that because she was freaking out over the fact that she'd had unprotected sex with Brand, and we can see that she was because of the stuff that she said within her text messages. You know, she asked him if she should get tested. She's angry with him because she prides herself on being safe, and she talks about his really bad sexual reputation. Could it be that she went to the center because they would have given her all of the things that she wanted at that time, which was emergency contraception, emergency STI test, and emergency antibiotics? Because within the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary, they even say within the documentary that she went to go to the crisis center the same day that she had that text message conversation with Brand. And because of the nature of these crisis centers, they're often walk-ins. You can just go in there. You don't have to book an appointment. So because of this, they would be very convenient for someone who's panicking and wants immediate care. But obviously, because these are not sexual health clinics, they are, you know, crisis centers, they deal with a very specific type of issue, and so I'm sure they have certain protocols and procedures that they have to follow, and one of those is probably filling out a report. And could it be that maybe she felt as though she had to word what happened to her in a certain way to justify why she was using their facilities? Because after all, it's not a sexual health clinic and it's not supposed to be used like one. Within the documentary, Nadia says that it wasn't until later on in therapy that she realized that the alleged incident was rape. Now, this could be because it took her a long time to come to terms with it, or it could just be because the discussion she had in therapy changed her perspective. But what that does mean is that she didn't view the incident in that way at the time, which means that it's unlikely the reason why she went to the crisis center, because as she said herself, she came to that realization later on in therapy. So perhaps the reason why she was at the crisis center is because she was freaking out over the unprotected sex she had with Brand, and so she needed the emergency facilities that they offer there. But I don't know, bruh. I wasn't there. That's just my armchair analysis. By the way, this is not me trying to necessarily like disprove or anything what Nadia is saying or whatever. I just think that people do have a point that her text messages do imply a slightly different scenario. And so I'm just trying to make sense of that to try and see, you know, what else may have happened here. Now, I said before that I'm suspicious of everybody. I explained to you why I'm suspicious of Brand, because although I have no idea whether or not he is guilty of these allegations, only time will tell, I do think that the evidence that's been brought forward, if it's all legitimate and if it's all true, does definitely give me enough reason to be suspicious of Brand in terms of maybe he may not have done anything illegal, but at the very least, the evidence, if it's all true and if it's all legit, does definitely give me enough reason to be suspicious that he may have done some unethical things at the very least in his past. Now, when it comes to the mainstream media, I'm also suspicious of them too. And the reason why I'm suspicious of them is because of the fact that they have openly said themselves that they are the ones who contacted the women. It wasn't the case that the women went out of their way on their own accord to contact the news outlet. And it does kind of make me wonder why. Why were they going out of their way to go and contact Russell Brand's previous sexual partners? What exactly was it that they were looking for? There have also been some women who've taken to social media to claim that they were also contacted by reporters.
I actually know who this is about, and I have the receipts. I was contacted in June by a journalist regarding a video I made about a certain celebrity and a weekend that we shared together. The video is kind of viral. It's on my page somewhere if you want to go see it. And that certain somebody was, as most of you will be aware, Mr. Brand. They weren't going to use my story because it didn't fit the narrative for their documentary, because he wasn't an asshole to me. But here are some of the messages. Obviously, I will take out the person's name and stuff. We had a phone call. She contacted me for more information, and I didn't contact her back because I kind of felt like it would be mean. Anyway, there you go. Put your bets on. It's a documentary about the one and only Mr. Russell Brand.
If all of this is true, then it does kind of make you wonder why. Why were they only specifically looking for negative stories? Could it be true that they do perhaps have ulterior motives? There were also a couple of things I found a bit peculiar about the Dispatches documentary. The first being that they hired actresses. Now, I understand, when people hire actresses in order to reenact scenes or whatever, in order for people to get a visual of what happened. But this to me was a bit bizarre because I've never seen it before. Maybe this is a common practice. Someone can let me know. But this is the first time I'd seen someone hire actresses to act out the words of the women, but also still blurred them out and made them anonymous. Because these actresses were sometimes completely blacked out, or their faces were blurred. And it just kind of got me thinking, I understand hiring actresses if you're trying to keep the women anonymous. But if you're going to blur the faces of the actresses or completely black them out, then why couldn't you just have the women tell their own stories so we could hear it in their own words and just keep them and make them anonymous in the same way that you did with the actresses? I also saw some people on social media say they found it really manipulative that Channel 4 Dispatches hired actresses to act as the accusers. And I can understand why, because at the end of the day, an actress's job is to be a believable liar. Their job is to convince you that they're experiencing emotions they're not actually experiencing. Their job is to convince you they're having experiences that they're not actually having. Another thing about the Dispatches documentary that I found peculiar was how they seem to use Russell Brand's stand-up bits or stand-up jokes as evidence, I guess, that he's a sexual predator. I do personally think that you're scraping the barrel if you're ever using a comedian's jokes as evidence. It's well known that comedians embellish, exaggerate, or even lie because the purpose is not to be accurate or to be correct. The purpose is to try and be funny. It was just weird. Just weird in my personal opinion. Maybe this is how documentaries are running now and I'm just not with the times. The reporting style did to me feel a bit manipulative at times. I don't really like all that. Like, just tell me what happened. But I guess with time and as the story starts to develop more, we'll hopefully know what the hell is going on. But as it stands at the moment, the position I'm choosing to take is one of an observer. I don't really want to formulate a full-fledged opinion yet because I think it's way too early. Because like I said, I'm suspicious of everybody right now, especially since learning that the UK government are getting involved, because I've never seen anything like that before.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
And I do think it's important for people to not get swept up with the insanity that is Twitter. You really don't have to be hardcore in either direction on this. You don't have to completely believe the allegations or completely believe they're fake. Because to be honest with you, it could be that Russell Brand maybe did some dodgy things in his past. And it could also be that the mainstream media have ulterior motivations for why they've decided to suddenly care. That is also a possibility, but who really knows? But those are just my current thoughts. Do let me know what your current thoughts are on the situation. I would be curious to know what your thoughts were when you heard the allegations, and if you watched the documentary, let me know what your thoughts were when you watched it. Well, that is all for me. If you enjoyed this video, you may as well like and subscribe. I am also on other socials and I also make music if you'd like to check me out. Links to all will be in my description box. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I will see you in my next video.